In this video, we look at research from my friend Joel Fruches into why people walk away from their faith in college.
Hi, I'm Joel Furchess, and this is Switching Sides. Today we're taking a look at this video by a YouTube channel called Dealing with Deconstruction, and an article that he's discussing about 3 reasons that college students leave Christianity. Now, he says the article is about my research. It really isn't. The only contribution from me to this article was a statistic the article borrowed from me. Everything else in the article is the opinions or thoughts of a Christian apologist named Gary Habermas. So I'm going to take a look at the 3 reasons he gives here and give my comments on those reasons based on my research. Let's take a look.
The first reason that Joel cites for why college students leave Christianity is peer pressure. Christianity is a minority position in higher education, and while the peer pressure isn't often super overt, even subtle questions from professors such as, "Oh, you're still a Christian? I didn't think anyone would believe in that by now."
Okay, so let's talk about peer pressure. Again, he's citing these as if they were my thoughts. These came from Gary Habermas. The article talked about me to begin with, so the article may have given the impression that this was my research. It really isn't. Peer pressure. Okay, so what you get when you go to college and you're a Christian, frequently you're a person who grew up in the church. Church environments tend to be sort of isolated. You know, your entire peer and community are also Christians. However, when you go to college, you leave that sort of protective bubble of the church environment, and you are exposed, possibly for the very first time in your life, to viewpoints that are not Christian. And so this sudden exposure to other worldviews with which you're not familiar causes a process called tinkering. Tinkering is when you start to adjust your particular views to accommodate new information that you've never been exposed to before. And tinkering is a significant part of the deconversion process in many cases. This was documented in terms of the internet usage. The more people are exposed to the internet, the more new information sort of flows in, and they have to absorb that information and then adjust the things they think they know in order to accommodate that information. In Christian colleges as well, there was a study that said that this exposure to new worldviews that are taught even in a Christian college causes this tinkering process to kick off. And oftentimes, it's the exclusive nature of Christianity that becomes unattractive once you start to develop relationships with people who are not Christians for the very first time. You're used to peers that you agree with, and now you've got peers that are disagreeing with you. And it's the first time in your life, or one of the first times in your life, that you've been heavily exposed to these other viewpoints. And so then you start to realize Christianity is sort of exclusive. It's a black and white, either you're in or you're out, with no middle ground. It's difficult to accept that when you're exposed to these other worldviews and find that they're not so bad, after all, that these people are good, nice, friendly people. And so the exclusive nature of Christianity starts to look unattractive at that point.
So let's continue with reason number 2, living in sin. I will read a quote from Nick, the author of the article where Joel's research is cited. Nick says this: perhaps one of the most sinister, but honestly one of the most common reasons someone ends up leaving the faith is that they find something that is considered sinful that they have ended up enjoying far more than the experience of their faith, and decided to drop one in favor of the other.
Now, I have to admit, I'm very conflicted on this one. I don't like the terminology living in sin because it sort of presupposes the Christian position. But it does make a good point insofar as sometimes the things that a person wants to do are incompatible with their current religious stance. And so they have three choices. They can abandon the thing they want to do in favor of the religious stance, which is uncomfortable. They can try to live with the tension of sort of reconciling their religious beliefs with their current desires or standards, or they could abandon the belief in favor of the other experience. And you see this happen a lot in cases of people who disaffiliate with the church. The church becomes uninteresting because they've got a different pursuit that they're more interested in. And so these people don't drop out and become atheists necessarily. Typically, they just drop out. They leave. The problem is when Christianity is so core to your identity, you're not a nominal Christian, you're a very committed Christian. This process of exiting is much more complex than just casually walking out the door. And so this is where we see deconversions, is when the person has to sort of surgically extract Christianity from their personality and identity. And so that's a difficult process. One of the reasons I have problems with this is that in my research, I really didn't find that many instances of a person who began behaving in a way which was inconsistent with their religious beliefs, then exited the religious beliefs. Typically, the person begins what I call process, and this is in other ways sometimes referred to as deconstruction. It's the process where you're actually examining your beliefs and starting to disassemble them, if you will. And it is during this process that the people start seeking out behaviors and experiences to replace the religious behaviors and experiences in their life. And typically, post-deconversion, when the person has adopted a identity that is irreligious, they do tend to heavily go into territory which their religion disallowed. And this is a consequence of what I call behavior control. In a religious environment, your behavior is kind of manipulated by the environment through approval and disapproval. So there's sort of this shaming that goes on when you behave in a way that you're not supposed to. And it's discussed among the church. It might be made public. It's not a very polite way of dealing with the behaviors that you want to do. And so the environment becomes uncomfortable because behaviors that you would like to have are shamed by the environment. And other behaviors are endorsed. Sort of the holier than thou types of behaviors are endorsed by the environment, and so they're encouraged. And by being part of that environment, you're actually participating in the shaming and endorsing process. And so at some point, the environment becomes aversive, and you would prefer to exit the environment. And so frequently we have people who exit religion and then begin to pursue sexual experiences that their religion did not permit them to. Occasionally, it's divorce that is an instigator for the deconstruction or deconversion process. So the church tends to frown on divorce. You feel it's necessary to get divorced for various relational or circumstantial reasons. And then you've got a situation in which your circumstances conflict with your religious convictions. And so the convictions become aversive, and you want to escape that aversive stimuli.
The third reason is the problem of evil. Now, there are a lot of things that fit under this umbrella for sure.
He's not lying when he says that the problem of evil involves a lot of things. In its most rudimentary form, the problem of evil is the basic observation that bad things happening in the world are incompatible with a good God. And this is an extremely common objection to Christianity. But it's not one of the more frequent objections raised by individuals during deconversion. When I did my case study, I looked at the frequency of specific objections by deconverts. Here are my findings. The problem of suffering and evil is represented by that bright yellow bar on the right. As you can see, it's in about the fourth tier down in terms of frequency. Now, once a religious person becomes an atheist, the problem of evil raises significantly as an objection against Christianity. So it might be called a sustaining objection, meaning that it makes religion seem pretty improbable once you're an atheist. But it is less of an instigating objection. So please don't confuse me to be saying that the problem of evil is never a problem during deconversion. See that giant gray bar that towers over all the other objections? That bar represents objections from the Bible. Bible objections range all over the map, but among them is the simple observation that the God of the Bible seems pretty cruel at times. He floods the earth and wipes out all living things that didn't catch the boat. He rains fire down in a couple of cities and kills everybody. He sends people to hell. So if we include problems people had with the evil depicted in the Bible, that bar rises a bit. Now let's talk about how the problem of evil interacts with religious beliefs. There are two general Christian approaches to evil. The first is that one's religion sustains and comforts one in the face of suffering. This is among the reasons that one sees much higher levels of religious practice among developing nations and impoverished communities. Not because they think that religion is going to improve their circumstances, but it gives them hope and purpose that transcends their circumstances. The second approach that Christianity has to the problem of suffering is that God will ultimately relieve you of your suffering, and possibly even give you a better life. The first approach actually increases the probability of religious practice in the face of suffering. The second approach increases the probability of deconversion under those same circumstances. Another motivating factor for deconversion in the face of the problem of evil is what we might call the outsider perspective. The problem of evil is much more potent objection in more prosperous communities. Possibly it is because people in areas with high standards of living are more sensitive to suffering. But it also has to do with the fact that if you happen to be living a comfortable life, and you look at the world outside your life and see all the terrible things out there, it doesn't seem to recommend religion to you. But if you happen to be in the midst of suffering, religion seems more attractive. So those are the three reasons from the article. Perhaps I'll do a video at a later date about what my list of reasons for deconversion in college would be. And we'll see how it stacks up against this list. This has been Switching Sides.